All right. So welcome, everybody. We're excited to have so many of you joining us today as part of our ongoing series with the National Network for the Transportation Workforce. This is our fall webinar series, and today's discussion is around teamwork and coordination of rapid infrastructure repair. And we're going to be talking about a case study of the Hernando-Desoto Bridge. So we have a really fabulous group of panelists assembled. This morning we have Brad Fries, who is now the Chief Engineer for the Nashville Department of Transportation. And then we have Steve Frisbee, who's an Assistant Chief Engineer for Operations with Arkansas DOT. We also have Pamela Cordenbrock, who is the Division Administrator for Tennessee with the Federal Highway Administration. We have Mike Welch, who is the Regional Director of Operations for TDOT. So, as I said, a lot of really fantastic panelists joining us this morning, and we're really excited about this conversation. So what we're going to do today is start this off with a facilitated discussion, and we'll probably go for 30 or 40 minutes just with some questions that we've already prepared with the panelists. But at any point, if any of the participants have questions, please feel free to enter those in the chat, and we will be taking participant questions later on in the program. So definitely be thinking about all of the questions you'd like to ask, because I know there's a lot that you'll be interested in with this group. So I'm going to start off with Brad, and I'm going to ask each of the panelists to please share briefly about their background and their role during the bridge closure, both for your organization and then your personal role. So Brad, let's start with you.
Sure. So during the time of the bridge closure, I was the director of the Traffic Operations Division with TDOT. So the way TDOT is organized, the Traffic Operations Division is a headquarters level division that really supports the regions, the regional TMC traffic management programs and incident management programs with data and other information in there. So during the time of this closure, that was really what we focused on is making sure we're providing the best guidance as far as operational guidance, looking at things, doing analysis, but also providing near real-time data to help leadership at the region and leadership at TDOT make informed decisions on different strategies to deploy.
Thanks so much. All right, let's see. How about Steve? You go next.
Sure, I'm Steve Frisbee. I'm the Assistant Chief Engineer for Operations for RDOT, and so we oversee, and there's three branches for RDOT, or planning branch, design branch, and operations. So on our side, we oversee all the construction, maintenance operations, bridge inspections for the state. So I've got 26 years with RDOT, worked my way through operations, field inspection, engineering oversight, as well as planning.
Thank you. Okay, Pam, let's go to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate the invitation to be on such a august panel. My name is Pam Cordenbrock. I'm the Division Administrator for the FHWA Tennessee Division. As such, I'm the head fed for surface transportation in Tennessee. I lead an office of 22. And we coordinate closely with TDOT, local governments, MPOs, and other partner agencies to deliver the federal aid program, and everything from finance, civil rights, engineering, bridge, safety, everything, operations, ITS, all the stuff that a state DOT does. We do at a division office, helping administer those programs, but maybe with just one or two folks, depending on the size of the program. So we're very happy to be a part of this panel and working with these folks again. Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, Mike, let's go to you.
Well, thanks, Dr. Avey, for having me. And it's a pleasure to get to share some of our experience with everybody. My name's Mike Welch. I'm the Director of Operations for Region 4 with TDOT. That's everything between the Tennessee River and the Mississippi River in West Tennessee. And I'm responsible for, of course, traffic ops in the region, maintenance and construction activities, materials and test, as well as incident management, such as our help program in Memphis and a TMC as well. So I've got, I guess, 28 years with TDOT, served in many roles, hired in entry level, and kind of worked my way through school. Attended the University of Memphis, and kind of been shifting around. And I've been serving in this role, I guess, for about 5 years now. And great place to work. And as this experience with this bridge shows, we get to do something different every day. We don't always know what it is, but it's never a boring job. We get to do a lot of different things and work with a lot of great partners like the ones on this panel with me.
Thank you so much. All right, so next up, we wanted to give a little bit of a history of the bridge, when it was built, how it was funded, whose responsibility it is for maintenance, enforcement, operations. And let's start with maybe Mike, and then Steve, and then, Pam and Brad, feel free to chime in as well. So Mike, let's start with you.
Sure. I guess I really don't, I've seen some pictures of the actual construction of the structure. It is our largest structure in Tennessee, and I guess our most valuable asset as far as that goes. Construction, I believe, was in the late 60s into the early 70s. It is a 6-lane structure, three lanes in each direction. When I came to TDOT, I worked here several years before I got a chance to get on it and actually be involved with repair projects. My largest involvement, I guess, came when we started a series of about 12 or 13 retrofit projects to bring it up to some type of seismic standard. And that included working with a lot of engineers, structural from California, different. But we did spend about $180 million on that structure not too long ago. And so that really, I got an opportunity to get really involved with the nuts and bolts and the different aspects, working with RDOT. But it is a great structure, and we're proud to have partial ownership. It is a shared ownership between Tennessee and Arkansas. So we have a lot of agreements in place. In fact, we started reworking our agreement with Arkansas well before this incident, but it's kind of long and drawn out legal document that kind of it kind of, I guess, prescribes what our responsibilities are as far as who maintains what, who takes care of inspection, shared cost on maintenance projects, repair projects, and such as the retrofit project and things like that. So it's interesting. It's a large structure, and takes its own life form, especially when it decides that you got a fractured member and other things have to be done. But you can just tell by the impact, and that lets us know how important it is to us. So it is very critical that it stays operational and safe, and very, very great team building exercise. Not a great experience to go through, but you definitely miss the interaction and the great teamwork that went along with that process. But we have, I guess, become better partners with RDOT and FHWA and different ones within the city of Memphis and headquarters working on this. So, those daily meetings and things like that. You probably got more questions that we'll get more in depth of that, but that's kind of my perspective of kind of the history of the bridge. Like I said, it's a valuable asset, and good to be a part of it.
Well, thanks. Steve, you want to add your perspective to this?
Sure, Mike, thanks. He covered it pretty well there. And I guess a couple of thoughts to add. As Mike said, when the bridge was built in the late 60s, early 70s, the two states shared the cost. I think back then, some of the history I read that RDOT didn't have quite as much money back then, so I think we negotiated a 60-40 split. But again, I wasn't around then. Don't know if that's all true, but interestingly, TDOT paid 60%, but yet 60% of the bridge is in Arkansas. So the total bridge is actually almost 10,000 feet long. You know, a lot of people think of the M shape that everybody recognizes, the two tide arch spans of this bridge, the 1,800-foot section there, but that's just one portion of this almost 2-mile long bridge. But anyway, we share the bridge. As far as the agreement, as Mike mentioned, the current agreement is that RDOT performs the bridge inspections, and we share the cost of that as per the federal NBIS inspection program. Each state does their own minor maintenance, and so on the Arkansas side, if there's minor things such as deck patching or just things that we can take care of, we do that. If we identify major maintenance or rehab work, then TDOT handles that. And again, both states jointly share the cost 50-50 on any major work, but TDOT handles that. And as we'll talk later, when the fracture occurred and it was decided it would be a major repair, per the agreement, TDOT took the lead, and that was very helpful because they had some mechanisms in place that really sped up the procurement. So anyway, I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Pam, Brad, would you guys like to add into that?
I can add something just briefly, just echoing what Mike said. You know, it may be adding a little bit to that. You know, the motoring public and travelers could give a rip if it's owned by Arkansas or owned by TDOT. Operationally, you know, we have to mature those relationships back and forth. And I know Mike has lived through it as far as when, even previous to this, when we've had closures on the bridge and working together, our help operations staff, you know, they respond across the bridge and into Arkansas, you know, to manage incidents. So this situation, however how painful it was, you know, for the motoring public and us at times, and my knuckles still might be white here, but no matter how painful it was, it did help us mature our relationship, you know, working back and forth between RDOT and TDOT, and that's one big positive that we take away from it.
The only thing I'll add quickly, Stephanie, is that while this bridge is part of I-40 and is on the federal interstate, the federal aid program is a state administered, federally aided program. And so the state DOTs own the entire network, whether it's federal interstate or any roadway that's owned by the state and local governments. So of course, there's a federal interest, and I'll talk about that later on in one of the questions, but the bridge is owned by the states.
Thanks so much, Pam. And now I want to introduce also Dr. Marty Lipinski. He works with me in the Southeast Transportation Workforce Center, and he and I are going to kind of tag team the facilitation for the rest of this session. So Dr. L, let's turn things over to you.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie, and happy December, everyone. Although in Memphis, it doesn't seem like December, as it's 65 degrees outside, very, very unusual. I'd like to begin the questioning with Steve. How was the fracture detected, and how did you communicate the information to TDOT?
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, RDOT handles the bridge inspections, and being such a large bridge, there are different portions that we consult out to private consultants. And so in this case, our consultant, Michael Baker International, had a bridge inspection team that was performing the inspections of the tide arches, the cables, and actually climbing to the top and rappelling down and performing those hands-on inspections of that portion. So they happened to be out there doing their inspection on May 11th. And although the area of the fracture was not in a portion that they were responsible for inspecting, it was adjacent to that. And as soon as they noticed that fracture, they immediately called 911. They had engineers, bridge inspectors out on site. It's my understanding there were 2 or 3 different people calling 911, telling the operators we've got a major emergency. and trying to get that shut down. At the same time, they had other inspectors or people calling RDOT, TDOT. So it was kind of a chaotic time as we were all being notified about the same time. I recall I was in an administrative meeting with our director and planning out some remote work plans and trying to nail down how that's going to look for the future. And had a couple of missed calls from a bridge engineer, and I thought, well, I can't answer this. I'm in with the director. And then my boss, our chief engineer, got the same call, and I believe he ignored it, but it didn't take long for somebody to break into the meeting and let us know. So I'm sure these other guys probably recall the same way the first they heard about it. It's definitely a surprise for us.
Brad or Mike, do you have anything to add? How you guys found out about it?
Yeah, I got that same call that Steve did, or Rex did. Pretty excited. Bridge engineer out on 40. I think his 911 call is recorded. I think it's even on YouTube. So it's pretty dramatic. But I don't think he overreacted by in any means at all. We're so fortunate nobody was hurt. But I can't imagine being in his shoes and seeing that, especially if there was any movement when you've got 6 lanes of trailer trucks and dump trucks and cars buzzing by loading that bridge. So anyway.
Okay, Stephanie, back to you.
All right. So next we wanted to talk a little bit about how the decision was made to close the bridge and the agencies that had to be involved and even the media, and how all of that was handled. So Brad, let's start with you on that.
So really that's something that Mike might have a better perspective on, and our chief engineer Paul Diggs and others in the commissioner level making those decisions. So I don't have the best insight on that at this time.
All right, well then let's go to Mike.
Yeah, of course, our number one concern is our commissioner, our former commissioner. Of course, as he stated many times, is safety, and we stress that any media events, any publications, any daily progress reports, or just anything that went out, safety is our number one goal. And like I said earlier, it's very fortunate that no one was hurt at all due to the fracture of the bridge, as well as during construction or any other phase of it. So we're really fortunate for that. But the call was made, and I believe we had a commissioner to commissioner, Tennessee to Arkansas kind of agreement. Steve can give some background on the Arkansas side, but it was determined that we would close off traffic, and we have a lot of detour plans kind of shelf ready, practically for about every mile, especially I-40, some of our major routes. So we have closed I-40 or had it closed before and closed it. We've closed 55. Not to say that's a daily routine for us, but it's always good to have lots of plans in place, especially when you get into incident management and things like that. So it went relatively smooth as far as that goes. Another big impact, of course, was closing the river traffic. So that, required a lot of interaction with Coast Guard, and then you've got barges starting to stack up on the banks and different things like that. So a lot of daily communication on just calls and wondering when something's going to be evaluated. And I'm sure there's more questions to come where we can kind of get into the phasing of the evaluations and global stability and things like that. But the river traffic, a lot of people don't view that as a major impact. They only, as Steve says, they don't care who owns it as long as they can get from A to B. but we've got so much commerce moving up and down the river, that whether it's gasoline headed to Nashville or, just produce or anything else. So that was a huge impact too, but and we were fortunate to be able to get it open pretty quick safely. So again, it's some of that wasn't us closing it. Some of us was just recommending, advising that, we wanted everything to be safe. And then like Coast Guard's interaction was, well, when do we feel like it would be safe for them to open it back up? So a lot of great partnerships, no blame games, throughout this process. I can't brag on everybody's efforts, and man, we were all in a boat rowing in the same direction, and I was just proud to be a part of it. So I'll shut up or I'll start chasing rabbits.
Well, that's fantastic insight. Steve, do you want to share
Hey,
from the
Stephanie, before-
Arkansas? Oh,
Hey, Stephanie, sorry.
Uh-huh.
I do have, after that initial decision was made to close the bridge, I do want to point out that, analysis on the bridge was nearly continuous, throughout the process, evaluating, different options as far as when traffic could return and what the condition is. So that never stopped, from, knowing, between the agencies, a lot of work was done in that throughout the whole process related to gauging what the capacity of that bridge.
Steve, let's get your insight here.
Sure, and I'll add that, I'm not a structural engineer, but as a operations engineer, you kind of have to be a jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing. So, but I am NBIS certified and familiar with some structural elements. And so most of y'all probably heard of this term fracture critical. And so these two spans, the tide arch spans on this bridge, are considered fracture critical. It's a very misunderstood term. It's a federal term as part of the NBIS, meaning that if there are elements on the bridge that are non-redundant, and in this case, the two tide arches, there are only two of them. So if one of those two fails, fractures, it can have a crack, maybe not be a failure, but if it fails, the bridge is at risk of collapsing. And so that's exactly what we had here. This is a very unique bridge design. It does not have the structural redundancy that we would design into bridges today. And so that's the key reason it was closed. And so the decision was made by Michael Baker. That was a weighty decision as our consultant, but as their engineers and inspectors were trained, and it doesn't take an engineer to know this, it takes a trained person. And so they're trained inspectors, and they did have PE on site, I believe. They knew immediately what member this was, and they knew immediately that it was very serious. And that's why they made the decision to close it. And as Brad mentioned, as soon as it was closed, everybody knew it was the right decision. And we immediately got consultants. Of course, Michael Baker was there. So they started reaching out to all their resources and engineers, structure engineers. We also picked up HNTB, another one of our consultants, for a second opinion, as you would say. They're one of our team members, and they jumped on a plane. They were there by the next morning. I think we were notified mid-afternoon. And so our guys were there that evening. Of course, the ones that came from Little Rock, we had others on site from the district. And we had a team there by daylight the next morning to assess it. And as Brad mentioned, they started running models that night. They started calculating. It's neat to see some of the photos that our consultants have of them basically drawing out the section on a napkin almost and calculating the stresses, not computer, and realizing, hey, this was serious and how much forces were on that tie girder. And so it definitely was a stressful and serious time.
Thank you. All right, Dr. L.
Yes, I have a question for Pam. What was FHWA's role throughout the process of the closure and the reopening of the bridge?
Thank you, Marty. So I'm going to tie a little bit into the last question into this question. So when when Mike was talking about the first and Steve were talking about the first contact to the directors of TDOT and to RDOT, I think the third call was to me, because this is an interstate. It's a critical bridge across the Mississippi. It carries a tremendous amount of freight. It carries a tremendous amount of car traffic. It's just a very, very important structure in the entire US network. So I'm very glad to say, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that I think the third call was to me. So after it was like, wait, what? I mean, I think we all had that, what's happening? We're close, what? And so after we had that kind of initial shock, it was, okay, what do we got to do? Exactly what Brad said. It was 15 seconds of, what are you telling me? And then 2.5 months of, all right, let's just get it done, and then we could figure out what happened. And I think my knuckles might still be a little bit white too, Brad. So essentially my responsibility was to let Washington know. So one of the things that hasn't been mentioned is that this occurred during National Infrastructure Week, when the Secretary of Transportation, when the president, when the FHWA administrator, motor carriers administrator, everybody was out talking about the importance of infrastructure. This was prior to the infrastructure bill being passed. So everyone was out talking about the importance of infrastructure, and then this happens. So on the one hand, it was good to bring a focus of the importance of infrastructure. On the other hand, it was bad because it could not have happened at a worse time during Infrastructure Week, when the entire focus of the media discussion was on infrastructure. So it was a giveth and taketh away kind of situation in that regard. So after letting our Washington office know, I called our executive director, called our chief bridge engineer, and ironically, or maybe for good, Tom Everett, our executive director, he used to be the bridge engineer in the Tennessee division. And so he, many moons ago, and so he was familiar with TDOT, he's familiar with the network. So being able to talk with him was fantastic because he knew what I was talking about. So at that point, we, kind of our responsibility at FHWA is to, one, ensure that the states have all the resources they need to do what they need to do. Okay. So when TDOT closed the bridge, they closed the bridge, right? They didn't ask, they told us, right? Because again, the bridge is owned by the state DOT. They let us know the relationships that we've established. And I'll be honest, the tone of voice that Paul Deggs talked with me about, I knew this was serious. I mean, even coming down to something like that, where I knew this was serious. TDOT is a very thoughtful organization, Arkansas DOT, thoughtful organization. They wouldn't just do this, right? And so I knew immediately, no questions. I knew immediately that this was something that needed to be done. I reached out to my counterpart in Arkansas, Vivian Huang. She already knew. So we immediately started coordinating with Washington because, again, because it was Infrastructure Week, we needed to tell the secretary's office. We needed to let everybody know, public affairs, et cetera. So that was kind of on the national scale, and Vivian and I kept that going in making sure that we were sending information constantly back to Washington, D.C., so that folks from Washington, D.C. weren't calling the state DOTs directly. We took that responsibility upon ourselves to make sure that we could let the state DOTs do the work that they needed to do, and Vivian and I and our staffs could manage the 2 billion questions that were coming in all the time. So during that time, we also did some coordination with elected officials, federal elected officials. We did some coordination with other federal agencies. We have contacts, kind of mentioning about the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard actually decided to close the river based on recommendations and information from the 2 state DOTs, but the Coast Guard's actually responsible for opening and closing barge traffic on the Mississippi River, right? So that was a federal agency. So Vivian and I did very little coordination because the relationships were actually at the state DOT level. But anything else, federal motor carriers, trucking associations, anything that was Corps of Engineers, all the federal agencies, Vivian and I took it upon ourselves to work with our staffs to make sure that we had those relationships going and we could provide whatever answer, federal answers needed to be provided, because we all speak our individual languages, right? So we wanted to make sure that we were able to take as much pressure off the state DOTs in that regard. The other thing that FHWA has a responsibility to is, and we have access, is emergency contracting authority. So in this particular case, we couldn't mess around, right? So we were able to take advantage through emails and we did phone calls and then emails, and then we followed up with more letter writing as needed. But in order to make sure that the state DOTs had the resources they needed, Vivian and I were able to take advantage of emergency contracting authority that is in the federal regulations that speeds up a lot of processes for emergencies in this case. So we took advantage of that, provided some funding up front just to make sure that there wasn't any gaps. And then so all this was kind of right at the beginning. And then during the crisis, I mean, it's a crisis. I mean, let's call it what it was. We participated, we were invited and very much invited to sit on the day-to-day meetings. I think that both Brad and Steve and Mike mentioned. And so I had technical staff, bridge engineer, operations engineer, traffic engineers sitting on daily meetings, providing feedback. And if there was resources needed from outside entities, Vivian's staff and my staff, we took advantage of calling in favors and saying, I need you to come to this meeting. Please participate, help us with the resources that we need. We really, the focus was making sure that we took as much pressure off the state DOTs as we could to allow them to do the work that they needed to do as quickly as possible.
Well, thank you, Pam. A very comprehensive answer. Back to you, Stephanie.
That's what I'm here for, Marty.
And that's why we appreciate you.
Yeah.
So, all of you have touched on the fact that, obviously this is an incredibly important structure. And this was a very significant event with the closure of this bridge. And so what we wanted to talk about now was asking each of you to kind of describe from your perspective the actions that were taken and the collaboration that was involved to really expedite repairs and reopening. Because I think, that's one of the really amazing aspects of this is it really was a true success story in that this was a very rapid turnaround from what could have been, a completely catastrophic situation to something that, with all of your efforts really turned out to be, quite positive. So Pam, let's stay with you because you've already talked about some of this already, but what else would you like to add related to that?
So, it's interesting. I'll say, of course, in retrospect, and I think Brad I've had a conversation. So, and I know with Mike, so when you're in it, you're in it. Like, and it's, you're just completely focused on what's happening. And then you can kind of take a step back after it's over and say, wow. But one of the things that I think we noticed in working this was kind of the traffic operations and kind of the traffic stuff that we needed to manage. I mean, we knew, I think if you talk to any of us, we knew what kind of traffic was on the bridge, but I don't think we truly knew until we closed I-40, right? And so how much commercial vehicles that we're dealing with, how many barges were on the river. I mean, I don't think we truly grasped that until we closed one of the arteries across the Mississippi River. And kind of looking at it in two phases, is we were so busy reacting. At one point we were reacting, and then we realized that this was going to be a much longer term closure. And so we needed to kind of maybe stop reacting and then sort of become proactive in managing. And I think we really saw that in traffic, right? And so I'll give a real quick example. One of the things that I don't think, we collectively between Tennessee and Arkansas put out a lot of traffic control, as you can imagine, lots of barrels, lots of barriers, DMSs. I mean, you can't imagine how much stuff went out in order to manage traffic. Well, then when it was time to open the bridge, we had put it out kind of very slowly. And then all of a sudden we had to take it up. It took us 2 days working pretty much 24 hours a day to get all that traffic control up. That took us a month and a half to put out. And I don't think we took that into account. Like, I mean, it didn't oh my gosh, now we've got to get rid of 1,000 barrels safely. You can't just pull them up. You've got to put police. And that was an example, I think, looking back, where we put everything out slowly. And then all of a sudden we had to take it all up at once.
Such interesting insight. Thank you. Brad, how about you?
Yeah, so Pam stole a lot of my thunder there. She actually said exactly what I was going to say as far as, we were reactive, but proactive at the same time. It seems contradictory to one another, but we were reactive starting out, doing what we can as far as the initial traffic control in the region. Did an excellent job, getting that initial traffic control. Mike mentioned the diversionary plans that we already had in the queue that we pulled up and instituted there, but then we became shifted to the more proactive stance of let's look at our choke points, let's look at the traffic. We already knew we had major issues at the Crump Avenue interchange just on the west bank of our east bank of the river there, coming across from Arkansas So we deployed some improvements there. We made one lane into a 1-lane ramp into a 2-lane ramp. So it was really a team effort. Every day we got together and met and looked at the traffic and shared thoughts and ideas on what we can do for operational improvement. Arkansas too. I mean, it was a great collaboration back and forth. And I will say, you know, as far as the impact of the closure, we learned a lot. I mean, we knew looking at ADT values ahead of time, we had around, you know, 50 to 55,000 crossing the I-40 bridge, around, you know, 40 to 45,000 crossing the I-55 bridge a day. So we kind of knew that, you know, and adding the two together, of what we could expect in there, but we were still missing through the whole period of time. We were missing around 18 to 20,000 ADT that, you know, where do they go, you know, out there? So we looked at a lot of data. We looked at a lot of origin and destination trip data. We knew that we saw that in our analysis, the I-55 bridge had more local trips historically, and then the I-40 had more of the longer route trips, you know, through the region. So it was very interesting, and I'm sure there's a lot of study opportunities, you know, looking at the data after the fact, but we were very proactive looking at what are the small things that we can do to increase the, you know, be it pavement marking improvements, be it, you know, changing lane designations in the region. I mean, they took on a lot as far as doing things in-house, and Mike may talk about this, that interchange, going from one ramp to a 2 ramp at that interchange just created such a huge improvement, and they did that all with internal forces. So I was just blown away at the work that the region did, getting out there and being able to do that operationally over a hot weekend. By the way, it was like a 90-degree weekend plus in Memphis. In the Memphis summer, they got out there and did it. So it was a great collaboration.
Thank you, Brad. Steve, what about you?
Oh, again, on the collaboration side of things, you know, with this being, I think as Brad or Mike said, it's the largest bridge that TDOT has, and really never thought of it that way. We have several large, but this is definitely one of the largest, and such a serious incident. You know, what was so helpful for me and what helped me sleep better at night was the collaboration and having friends, you know. And so if this had happened solely in Arkansas, you know, the RDOT family, you know, we would have handled it, but it would have been tough. But to have friends, just like in your personal life, friends with FHWA that are right there beside you, friends with TDOT, it was sharing that burden was just so huge. And then to add our consultants, you know, when I started over 25 years ago, there were not that many consultants out there, and we didn't utilize them the same. And so now to have those friends that you can just call on a dime and are going to fly out again, you know, it's a friend when you're in trouble, and they're going to be there the next morning. And that's what we had with the feds, with TDOT, with our 2 consultants. And you just feel stronger that as a collaborative team, we can handle this, from the public information side of things to the emergency service. And again, I'll even add, you have the 2 cities, the city of Memphis, city of West Memphis, the emergency services. I mean, it was a huge team. And also, I think a key was a benefit of COVID, as has been mentioned, the Zoom calls like this. You know, the technology's been out there. We've all used it, but it was a bit clunky. But after going for a year of having to do this, it was second nature. And so we were on 3 Teams calls a day. There was a 9 a.m. structures call, then the 3 p.m. or maybe 4, 3 p.m. general call, then traffic operations 3:30, and then I believe another call at 4. And it was just, it felt nonstop, but I could sit at my desk. We had people all over the nation from this whole collaborative team of friends that could do their jobs and not all have to be on site. And I hate to forget our contractor, Kiewit, and the way, I won't tell that whole story, but the way that they were able to be procured literally over a weekend. TDOT had plans together, and had plans together by the first Friday in the first 72 hours. And then over the weekend had a contractor selected. And then again, Kiewit was a part of the family, a part of the friends, and they were working with everybody. And so to me, that was the key to the success. That again, without that technology, things would have moved so much slower. But I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that perspective, Steve. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, there's so much you could talk about. I'll try to be quick. Pam mentioned our use of emergency funding and things like that. I will add TDOT working with state legislation back about a decade ago. We are able to do a type of emergency type letting where we can do something relatively quick, and that's definitely a success part of this to help accelerate the repair process. The fracture was found on a Tuesday and the bridge was closed. By that Friday, we had enough, I guess, scope and analysis of what the repair would need to at least start looking like to advertise to a select. We were able to hand select bidders or contractors to give us some response back. So, and we required that to be back by Monday morning, and then by Monday noon, we had awarded the contract to Kiewit, and a great partner, as Steve mentioned there. And one thing that we can look at with that is, of course, availability. If contractors are tied up on other projects and unable to move in, their expertise level in this type of situation and the resources they have. I will say, when we first started this, we really thought this work was going to have to take place from the water, and that would have probably doubled, the closure time. That work is so expensive and so slow. But getting Kiewit on board and really having a lot of people a lot smarter than me work on things, they were able to develop a platform type system and perform the work and go through phases. Phase one was, of course, to provide global stability to the bridge, where you could actually drive. We wouldn't even allow vehicles to drive out on the structure, until some further analysis, as Steve talked about the models and different things like that. So phase one was to, get some global stability to the bridge, and then try to get it to a level where Coast Guard, felt like, a level of factor. When we looked at wind loading, it's a big structure, it catches a lot of wind. So, a lot of factors are in place. Phase two, of course, reinforcing that area. Phase three was actually doing some post-tension work to replace the member, and then, kind of check some surrounding areas if we had any kind of repeats going on in different areas. So a lot of analysis by Arkansas and TDOT to do that. So that was a positive side, being able to get a contractor on board. Ed, Steve mentioned we had structural engineers, consultants working around the clock 24 hours a day on it to kind of get to a certain point. On the traffic side, Brad's group, I think one thing we've got here that we didn't have probably even 5 years ago is just an incredible amount of data and resources. I mean, I don't know that we could have had daily Teams meetings. It may have been conference calls, but it was so good to look at the traffic data that Brad's group generated, where we could Tismo it every day, basically, Brad, I believe. So, we really worked hard, great to work with Arkansas to try to modify anything we could to prevent. I mean, they had you had some 3-hour backups, I believe, didn't you, Steve? Maybe more than that. And we had some very long ones too. So getting that extra lane in right there at the French Fort neighborhood, coming off the bridge, and closing down some of these ramps that come into 55, just a lot of brain power, a lot of good traffic engineers on the phone, just analyzing daily the data, just an unlimited amount. But all that, we just have to kind of stay cool headed and figure out how to put all the pieces together to make it work good. But incredible partnership and just, like I said, great resources and everybody willing to work together.
Thank you. And I want to take a quick second just to thank Brad for being part of this today. He's got to head out for a meeting at the mayor's office, but we appreciate your insight and perspectives. Thank you for being here.
Thank you,
and joining us.
Stephanie.
Thank you,
Thank
Brad.
you. Good to see y'all. Thank you, Steve, Mike, and Pam. Thank you
Good
very
to see you,
much.
Brad.
And before
Okay,
Dr.
I've
L
got-
asks
I've
the
got-
next
yeah,
question,
I've
I
got a
did
question
want
to
to,
the group, maybe begin with Mike. How many days was the bridge closed? And I know you and Pam both mentioned the impacts on the water traffic and the closure for a couple of days. What about on the automobile traffic? How long were delays, queues during the worst of times? How many hours were delays at the worst of times? And how was all this information communicated to the public?
Okay, Dr. Avery, did you have something that I cut you off? Or?
I just wanted to remind everybody to put your questions in the chat because we do want to be able to answer questions from the audience.
Okay. Dr. Lipinski, the bridge was closed 84 days. And we set kind of some goals along the way to have, certain, we knew it wasn't going to be a full opening, it was going to be a partial opening. Turned out it was a directional opening, but we'll take whatever we get. There's a couple of days between them. Let's see, that was the closure. I'm sorry, what was your second question? You're muted.
How significant, how long were the queues in the worst of times and how many, delays in terms of minutes?
They were absolutely horrible on the front end. Hours even. I mean, we had several backups in Memphis back to the 240-55 split. Arkansas, we worked with them and Steve and his group. They had them back to the 40-55 split. It was just absolutely horrible. Since about the second day in, we committed to the commissioner that we would post a help truck, a TDOT help truck on both sides of the 55 bridge, just to minimize any type of closures. Of course, incidents occur, and every time one occurred on the bridge during the detour, we all drawed up really tense. But we did keep help trucks posted on each side of the bridge 24 hours a day just to help keep it free, because you'd be surprised how many trucks just decide to stop on the bridge and catch on fire and things like that. It's just amazing that bridge holds up. And one thing to think about on the traffic, I mean, everybody's made really good points on the traffic, but 55 carries more traffic than 40. But we went from 4 lanes on 55 and 6 lanes on I-40 all to that 4 lanes, and narrow lanes, I might add, very limited shoulders on 55. So I think I can't give our public relations team enough credit. Even in Arkansas, they sent out daily reports. We worked closely with a lot of trucking associations like Honey Egger and those different ones to try to get the word out. We put message boards out in, I know Arkansas had them. We had MDOT, Mississippi DOT running boards over that way, and we had them back in as far back as Chattanooga, advising that the I-40 was closed in Memphis. So I think I won't say that it was perfect, but over time people did adjust, and once the trucking companies and these different trucking associations, they figured out different ways to go. That's a mighty big river. That's one of the largest rivers in the world. There's not a lot of crossings. We're fortunate to have 2 in Memphis. We do have one in Dyer County that crosses into Missouri. It's a fracture critical structure as well. And then when you get outside, I think there's another one a few hundred miles south of Memphis. So very, very limited, but we did created a website for the bridge and kept everybody updated on the process. Just work continually to try to thinking outside the box on anything we could do to try to mitigate traffic. But a lot of great communication, people strictly dedicated to try to mitigate as much as we could.
Thank you. Steve, you have anything to add?
Yeah, like Mike said, you're talking 10 lanes of traffic. And as Brad said before, 90,000 vehicles a day. You've got, for us, I-40 carries more traffic on the Arkansas side. We got I-40 from the west, I-55 from the north. They join in at West Memphis. Then you split into 40 and 55 into Tennessee. And so that 90,000+ vehicles of traffic, we had some diversion, of course, and that helped. But now you're taking 10 lanes down to 4, and it was horrendous. We had 5-mile backups, well over an hour. Thankful for TDOT for the SmartWay system, their ITS that came into Arkansas. That's been there for several years, that we had that data we could use. And so we can monitor that backup, but the queues were going beyond what their ITS system was showing. So we were seeing multi-hour backups. Like TDOT, we quickly got some help trucks set up there. We had highway police monitor the queue the entire time, lots of message boards, all those things. But again, it was several weeks of that, very bad queues during the daytime. And I won't get into the whole story, but it was amazing effort again from our district staff, Cannon Calicut, our district engineer, and his team, to the cities, to working with TDOT and meeting, collaborating, and coming up. We brainstormed ideas, and the neat thing is, with that much traffic, we got all those lanes of traffic sucked down. The solution for us, as TDOT was working on the Crump interchange, is we actually took where 40 and 55 join. You got 2 lanes and 2 lanes join into what we call the west split and the east split on West Memphis. You join into 3 lanes of traffic, and it was just a snarl with all the on ramps, off ramps, a lot of diversion going on. And so our solution was actually to take away lanes to smooth things out. And so we took 3 lanes of traffic, and it seemed a bit anti what you would think. You've got that staging, you got that storage in 3 lanes, but yet the storage is not what you want. You want flow. And so we actually cut off, actually closed the middle lane, and ended up closing, leaving 40 on one lane separated by 55 to 1 lane. And so by narrowing each one down from 2 lanes to 1 lane, that kind of kept that flow going, and then keeping them separate for a longer time. We closed on ramps, we closed off ramps, and all that together combined, that made a significant increase. And then TDOT was the savior when they got in and took that action at Crump and was able to get 2 lanes of traffic, and that followed our actions. We jumped from that multi-hour delay for that 7-mile trip that under free flow conditions is about 7 minutes. After the 2 traffic control changes, that well over 1 hour turned into about a 15-minute delay max. I mean, it was almost amazing. On Mondays and Tuesdays, it was almost free flowing. And I thought, how can we get that many vehicles in 4 lanes? But it was working. Yeah, there were still heavy traffic days, Fridays, 4th of July weekend, when there was a stalled vehicle. We did turn around and get a 1 or hour and a half queue, but it was amazing how well the traffic control changes worked during that latter half.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Well, I don't see any questions in the chat, and I know we're running out of time. So we're going to close out, and I'd like to ask each of you to share from your perspective what were the most important lessons learned through this experience. So Pam, I'd like to start with you.
Well, we could talk an hour on lessons learned, and I'll start out by saying that the relationships that we had before were only strengthened during this. And so the most important thing was the relationships that we had was what we took advantage of and grew as we got this. But I'll give you something that was maybe a little bit odd or maybe small, but it was really important. And I'll give props to both Arkansas DOT and Tennessee DOT for doing this. Every day at 1 o'clock, give or take 15 minutes, there was a media brief that was released. And I think Mike and Steve will mention that. By doing that, the media then knew every day, give or take 15 minutes at 1 o'clock, there would be information released. So it cut down on the number of phone calls to everybody. And I think, and that allowed Mike and Steve and their staffs to actually do the work that needed to be done, because public affairs was going to be sending out regular information. And then if there were questions, then public relations could. But it was, I think it was one of those things that maybe didn't get a lot of fanfare. It was incredibly helpful because we also got the information. Then we could brief the secretary's office and federal officials and anybody else. That was a huge thing that I would just encourage other people to do in that situation.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Steve next. And I do also want to mention that Nate Taylor has posted a question in the chat. So I'd like to ask Pam and Mike, while Steve's talking, if you could take a look and see if you can respond to him in the chat there. And then Steve, you'll get a chance after you provide your insight on this.
Make sure I'm clear. So the question here was the lessons learned. Was that? Sure. Again, I don't want to be a broken record, so I'll be short on this one, but as I've said, the collaboration, and it was said very well by these guys earlier that the relationship with RDOT and TDOT matured. And so just to have that collaboration is amazing. And I brag, I'm fortunate. I got to serve as a district engineer in Southwest Arkansas with TxDOT, an amazing team over there at TxDOT. And I had that collaboration, got to build Interstate 49 with Louisiana DOTD and got to build that collaboration. So I've known this for years. So I wouldn't say it was a fresh lesson learned, but it's always just a great feeling that collaboration's there. And it's sad that it takes these emergencies to make that happen, to have those friends draw closer, but it does. And so I worked in East Arkansas for several years with Rex Vines in that district that oversaw that. And I would attend different MPO meetings, but I really personally didn't get that relationship with Mike or others with TDOT during those few years, but it took this. And again, these are lifelong connections now that, you can call when the next thing occurs. And so again, the key to anybody, whether it be DOT or any industry, is we can't do it alone. The key to my civil engineering career is not the engineering math or the studies, but it's the relationships with the people that can help me do it. We all do it better together. Thank you.
That's great. Mike, let's have you close this out. And then again, anybody that can respond in the chat to Nate, that would be great.
Just very, very, to be such a negative incident, a very positive experience, great effort, teamwork. I've participated in a few panel discussions and give presentations, and a lot of people are amazed at how everybody comes together and works, toward doing something. When you have I guess a more minor type incident, there probably is a little more time for well, who was responsible? How did this happen? But we knew that safety, number one, user cost, trucking industry, I don't have a magic number, but I would estimate, there's probably $1 million a day cost here to, commuters and trucking and things like that. So that has such a national impact on deliveries and everything like that. So as well as the river traffic. So, we all really wanted to do anything we could to get it open as quickly as possible. So having a great contractor and having great partners like Arkansas, FHWA, City of Memphis, being aware of those resources ahead of time helps a lot, because there is a little learning curve going into it when it does occur. But I already have, I've been here a long time and been doing my job for a pretty good while. So I'm pretty experienced in it, but I would recommend to anybody, I would try to approach everything as with a servant leadership type approach, and kind of stay calm evaluate your resources, utilize your resources, and make sure you're, kind of maximizing the benefit and, trying to achieve goals and keep deadlines. And, there's a lot of accountability for what we do. So that's, it's like Steve and Pam both have mentioned, it's strengthened everything we have. Got some good news for everybody, especially those that live in Memphis. I don't know if everybody on the line here is from the Memphis area or not, but we're having weekly meetings on the Crump Interchange project, and we do look to be letting that in the early spring, late winter next year. So we've got a lot of committed designers and things working on that. So it will include some short-term closures, but we're excited about making some major improvements to that interchange that'll help flow in Tennessee and Arkansas, and kind of give us little more relief, if anything did heaven Lord forbid happen like this again. But I think in closing too, Arkansas and TDOT both have worked very tirelessly to make sure all aspects of that bridge have been reviewed by really great structural engineers, even double checked and triple checked by different firms to know where we're at. So I want everybody to feel like it was very safe to travel on, and we're getting ready to do some work on 55 too, while the Crump interchange is reconstructed. So anyway, but I sure do appreciate the time that you've let me be a part of this, Stephanie.
Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks very much to both Pam and Amanda for chiming in there for Nate. We appreciate that. And just really appreciate you guys sharing your insight. This was, obviously an incredibly difficult situation, but I think the collaboration and teamwork that you guys were able to bring to the effort really resulted in something that, as I mentioned before, ended up being a very positive result. So thanks so much to everybody for joining us today. And we hope you will continue with our series. We've got one more coming up in December. So if you have not registered for that one, it's nntw.org. You can check out the webinar series and sign up for the next one. So thanks again to everybody, and we appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for including me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, panel.
Thank you all.
Good to see everybody. Y'all have a great day.
Take care.